Good morning, I'm Arthaketu. Particularly warm welcome if it's your first time here or if you haven't been to the centre that much. So I'm going to be giving the talk today, and it's called Motivation, Commitment, Helpfulness. That's what I've called it. So what I want to do is I want to explain kind of three important aspects of Buddhist practice, sort of using those three words. And actually, if you look at quite kind of traditional Buddhist texts, particularly kind of from the Tibetan tradition, you'll find these three things laid out sequentially. So you'll find this sense of motivation, and then commitment, and then helpfulness. And what it actually relates to are three sets of practices. So the first thing to do with motivation, in relationship to Siddhartha Gautama, the person that became the Buddha, he had his own kind of motivation for practice, which was seeing the four sights. But actually, traditionally, the four things that help you to become motivated to practice are what are called the four mind turnings. So that's motivation. And then commitment is related to going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. And helpfulness is related to cultivation of the bodhicitta. So I suppose I've used these three words just to kind of, what I want to do is give you a sense of what it is that you need to do in a way. If you want to practice those three things, because some of them probably sound quite abstract, like the cultivation of the bodhicitta, what is that? Well, the word that I'm using for that is helpfulness. So, motivation, commitment, helpfulness, mind turnings, going for refuge, bodhicitta. So, to start with motivation, so it's really important to get yourself motivated and to remain motivated. And when I'm saying that, I'm thinking, if you really want to go for it as a Buddhist, I'm kind of thinking for the whole of your life. So there will be initial motivation to practice, but that motivation needs to be renewed over and over again, because our inspiration wanes, we get distracted, we lose our motivation. So like I said, Siddhartha, the man that became the Buddha, his initial motivation to practice was that he saw the four sights. So some of you will be quite familiar with what the four sights are. So he saw old age, sickness and death, and he saw a wanderer, a holy man. And the first three sights, at the time he was living in quite a sheltered, secluded, he was living a very hedonistic life before he saw those three sights. And those three sights shook him to his core, to the point that something had to change. So the next sight, the holy man, or you could even just say the practitioner, Sangharakshita says it in a particular lecture. He says that sight decided him. I quite like that. It decided him. In a way, he made a decision based on that sight. And he kind of intuited that maybe this sight of the holy man could answer the question of the sufferings of existence. So he'd really seen old age, sickness and death. And he was very concerned about that, very concerned for himself, but also very concerned for the people that he loved, his family, and maybe even all beings, I don't know. So it decided him. And what happens in the story of Siddhartha is that he goes forth. So how that is talked about, so I'll just read you what it says. It says, "This home life is confinement or cramped, a basis for dust. The going forth is like open space. Having seen this, he went forth." So a sense of confinement, and then a sense of trying to find the answer, in a sense, to that confinement by living a particular life. Where I imagine most of us are not going to live the life that Siddhartha lived. But I suppose what it points to is the fact that we need conditions in our life that support our practice as Buddhists. So that's Siddhartha's motivation. And then you've got these, the 4 mind turnings. So I'm going to say what they are. I'm not going to go into all of them. So the first mind turning is the precious human life. The second one is impermanence. The third one is karma. And the fourth one is what's called the defects of samsara. So the suffering that's present in ourselves and in the world. So each of them is a subject for a whole talk, but I'm going to say a little bit about 2 of them. So I'm going to start with impermanence. So impermanence in Buddhism is usually used in 2 ways. So firstly, it can be used as to bring a sense of urgency. So when you start to see impermanence, particularly when you start to have a sense of death, it brings a sense of urgency. You have a sense that there's not much time. That's one way that impermanence is used. And the other way in which it is used is more like you use impermanence as a perspective when you're meditating that brings about wisdom. So you look at your experience you look at all of your experience, your thoughts, the images, the feelings, the emotions, the volitions, moments of consciousness, all of those things that we can notice within ourselves, and we see them, we turn towards them, and what we see is impermanence. And when you see that deeply enough, wisdom can be attained. So they're the 2 ways in which impermanence is used, but in this talk I'm using it in the first way, which is to bring a sense of urgency. So what I want to do now is I want to read three readings. Yeah, it's always interesting, I think, giving a talk or preparing a talk, and you're obviously doing it in your own home and all the rest of it, and then you come to the class and then you are chatting to people, and then you think, God, am I really going to talk about that? Am I really going to say that? Well, yeah, I am. I've done the talk and this is what I'm going to say. So the readings are quite pokey. So the first one is very short. So it says, death is certain, the time of death is uncertain, what will I do? That's the first reading. So that, remember, this is all to do with trying to motivate yourself to practice. The second reading is more poetic, and it's by Tsongkhapa, and it's called The Human Body at Peace with Itself. So he says, the human body at peace with itself is more precious than the rarest gem. Cherish your body, it is yours this one time only. The human form is one with difficulty, it is easy to lose. All worldly things are brief, like lightning in the sky. This life you must know as the tiny splash of a raindrop, a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. Therefore, set your goal, make use of every day and night to achieve it. I was getting real goosebumps reading that. And then the last reading is from Padmasambhava, and it's a part of the root verses of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So he says, with mind distracted, never thinking death is coming, to slave away at the pointless business of mundane life, and then to come out empty, it is a tragic error. There's a bit more to the reading, but those 3 lines. So that particularly the last reading, with mind distracted, never thinking death is coming, to slave away at the pointless business of mundane life and then to come out empty is a tragic error. So this particular reading, so the book sits on my shelf, but the reading kind of gnaws away at me. It kind of eats into me. It shakes me up. I know that those particular lines are there, and I know that they have an effect on me. They move me. They challenge me, actually. So that is because I know that I'm 53. I know that the average life expectancy of a man is around about 77. I know, thinking about the other reading, that the time of death is uncertain. So maybe I haven't got till 77. I don't know. You don't know. And then this other line, and then to come out empty, it is a tragic error. So what I think that means, I don't know for sure, is that to come out empty means that I have lived my life and transcendental wisdom has not been attained. I've lived my life and transcendental wisdom has not been attained. I live my life and I come out empty. That is very challenging. So the two things, not much time and wisdom needs to be attained. And the reason why it needs to be attained is because I said in the last talk that I gave, I said Buddhism gives us ways of working with suffering, and it gives us methods to reduce suffering. A lot of kind of what we do in Buddhism, you could say, is it has that effect. It reduces our suffering. We don't suffer as much as a result of practice. But Buddhism is also saying that suffering can end. And that ending comes about through insight, through transcendental wisdom. That is also a possibility if you practice. So the next mind turning, the precious human birth, it comes at things from a slightly different angle. Maybe you'll be glad. So from the Buddhist perspective, the human birth, the human birth is precious. It really is precious. And it's precious because with a human birth, there has to be certain conditions in place. But with a human birth, the conditions can be in place to practice. So for instance, some of these things might sound really obvious. We have a body and we have functioning senses. We have eyes, we have ears, we can read the Dharma, we can hear the Dharma, so the Buddha's teachings. And that's possible because the Buddha attained enlightenment, and that influence of enlightenment is still present in the world. This is partly why the human life is so precious. We live in a country which is free of war. We live in a country where we are free to choose whatever religion we please. And we live in a time where Buddhism is being taught. So all of these things might seem obvious, but actually if you reflect on them, if you go back so many years into the past, that wasn't the case. There wasn't Buddhism in Germany, there wasn't Buddhism in England. If you go back so far, Buddhism was spreading and more flourishing in other countries. It wasn't here. So we're very fortunate actually. And then coming a bit more closer to us in this particular tradition, so we've got a teacher, Sangharakshita, And he is very clear on the Dharma, actually. So if you stick around and you read his stuff, or you listen to his lectures, or you do study, you get a very firm, clear grounding in Buddhism, which gives you also a way to navigate the immense jungle that Buddhism is. It's kind of like, it's vast, isn't it? How many thousands of books have been written these days on Buddhism? There are some other very good teachers of Buddhism, but sometimes I kind of, when I read their stuff, I sort of think, if I didn't have the grounding in reading Sangharakshita, I could probably take this the wrong way. Because sometimes things are taught very poetically. There isn't always a sense of clarity. So that is also all of those reasons are reasons why the human birth is precious, because we've got this time and opportunity to practice. We've also got, generally, we've got some leisure time to do things like meditate, to study, to go on retreat. And like I say, born in another time, born in another place, we wouldn't have it. And the image that was coming to mind for me when I was thinking about this, maybe you could say anytime you encounter the Dharma, it is like landing on an island of jewels, actually. It is very rich. You can become very rich, in a sense. Maybe not in monetary terms, but in terms of the qualities that the Dharma is trying to get you to cultivate, the perspective that it is giving you in your life, the ability that it has to reduce your suffering is astounding, actually. It's an island of jewels. So next, commitment. So commitment, the word that it's pointing to is going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. So I'm not going to say loads about this. In a sense, it's like the more and more you come to the Buddhist Centre, the more and more you'll hear this. Probably some of you have heard it quite a lot already. So, but I will say a little bit. So the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, are transcendental refuges. So they go beyond your normal everyday experience, and they go beyond our ordinary existence. They point to something which goes beyond. So the Buddha represents the ideal of enlightenment which we can move towards. And he represents the fact that we can awaken, we can attain what he attains. So in the words of the threefold puja, it says, the Buddha was born as we are born. What the Buddha overcame, we too can overcome. What the Buddha attained, we too can attain. Fantastic, isn't it? And then the Dharma, so the Dharma is the truth that the Buddha realised, and it's the path and practices that lead to that realisation. So again, in the words of the threefold puja, the truth in all its aspects, the path in all its stages, we aspire to study, practice, realise. So it's important to understand with the Dharma that if you want to realise the truth that it's pointing to, you need to study and you need to practice. So I remember when I was in Manchester, I led a Mitra study group for a long time, and at some point I realised I'd been with these guys about 7 or 8 years, and I realised that some like basic Buddhist formulations they just didn't know. I don't quite know how that was possible because I was leading their study. Maybe that says something about me, I don't know. But it's like you have to learn your basic Buddhism. You have to learn the lists and this kind of thing. You have to study. Actually, in a sense, I actually study quite a lot, really. Because you need that in order that when you sit down to meditate, if you want to reflect on the Dharma and you want to penetrate into the truth, you need to know how to do it. And the Dharma is telling you how to do it. And some things take quite a bit of like reading and reflecting on, I would say. And maybe it's also worth saying that sometimes what I find is that with Buddhism, sometimes I read a text and I don't understand it. But I'm interested. So I've got certain texts that give me a lot of inspiration, and I sort of know that they're pointing towards the truth. And what I found is that over the years, sort of the more I've read, the more I've studied, the more I've spoken to people, the more meditation that I've done, it's like all of these little parts of this text that I didn't understand slowly become clearer. So study is important, actually. And then there's Sangha. So Sangha has two aspects to it. There is the transcendental aspect, so the Sangha that you go for refuge to, that you can really truly rely on. So that is I think what is beautiful about that is that it says that there isn't just the Buddha and this ideal of enlightenment that he discovered. Actually, his immediate disciples, men and women, attained what he attained. And as Buddhism spread throughout the world and moved into different countries, Tibet, China, Japan, into the West, kind of more people realised what the Buddha realised, was able to communicate what he saw to varying degrees. They attained to transcendental insight, they attained to wisdom, and they taught from that. And you get all of these amazing Buddhist traditions that have grown with particular teachers at particular times that have taught the Dharma, that taught the teachings of the Buddha. So that's one aspect, what's called the Arya Sangha, the transcendental, what we go for refuge to. And then there is us. We are also a Sangha. We also try to put the teachings of the Buddha into practice. And in this particular tradition, in the Triratna Buddhist community, the Triratna Buddhist order, there is a very strong emphasis on friendship, on what we call spiritual friendship. It's not there in all traditions, from what I've heard talking to other people. It's not an emphasis. Sangharakshita, the kind of founder of this movement, really put that to the fore, which is really important, actually. I think it's one of his kind of like insights, or one of his geniuses, is that he saw that friendship as a relationship was so important. So important. So I'll read to you just a little bit about what he says about spiritual friendship. So this is from Sangharakshita. So the Buddha has said, spiritual friendship is the whole of the spiritual life. Why is this? Of course, we learn from those we associate with, especially those who are more mature than we are. And learning will clearly be important if we are to make progress in the spiritual life. But in what does progress in the spiritual life really consist? What are we really learning? The knowledge we need in the end is self-knowledge, and the real significance of the deep individual-to-individual contact that going for refuge to the Sangha involves lies in a simple psychological fact. We get to know ourselves best in relation to other people. So that's commitment. Commitment to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. Going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. So then helpfulness. So with helpfulness, I wanted to use a word which you can relate to. So what helpfulness is pointing towards in this sequence is what's called the arising of the bodhicitta. So the arising of the bodhicitta means the will to enlightenment for the sake of all beings. That's what happens when the bodhicitta arises. There's a sense of wisdom and compassion that wants to help other people. The arising of the bodhicitta is to do with what's called the bodhisattva. So now I'm using quite a lot of terms here. The bodhisattva means Bodha is awakening and sattva means being. So it's the being who is bent on awakening for the sake of all beings. So what does a bodhisattva do? How do they set up the conditions for this experience, the bodhicitta, to arise? And maybe it is worth saying that, like, I'm using this word helpfulness. Helpfulness really does not do justice to what the bodhicitta is pointing to. The bodhicitta is another way of talking about enlightenment. Yeah? But I want to give you a way in. So you could say that what conditions need to be in place for the bodhicitta to arise. You could talk about that we need to practice altruism. Yeah? But for me, maybe for you, it might be different. Altruism doesn't do it for me, really. It's like, well, what does that mean? It doesn't have an immediacy of communicating what this particular aspect of the path is. So that's why so then it's like, so how then do I remind myself of what the bodhisattva path is? How do I remind myself of what cultivating the bodhicitta is about? So, simply, to think about being helpful. That's it. Just have that in my mind. Are there opportunities where I can just help? And doing that. Or kind of more recently, these two words came to mind and I put them on my shrine. I'll tell you why I put them on my shrine in a minute. So the two words were benefit beings. So that's also what just keys me in to this particular aspect of the path. Benefit beings, Arthaketu. Just benefit beings. So to go back into more the traditional side of things, so the bodhisattva path is about going beyond self. So this is also another way of talking about the kind of insight of it. It's about going beyond self. And it's achieved by practicing the 4 immeasurables. So we've already practiced one of the 4 immeasurables this morning. Immeasurable loving kindness. That's the first one. So we're already on the way. Immeasurable loving kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable sympathetic joy, immeasurable equanimity. They're the kind of the emotions, I don't even know whether emotions are the right word, volitions that we're trying to cultivate. I remember overhearing Lala Saratna talking to somebody in the tea room, I think it was a few weeks back, and I heard him saying, these are the emotions of the Buddha. So if you think about how the Buddha would be emotionally, that would be the emotions that flow. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. Not only those, but those. The other way that the bodhicitta arises is by practicing the 6 paramitas. The 6 paramitas are generosity, ethics, I've got to look at my notes, patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. So, I suppose what I've noticed recently is that Buddhism has got, like if you look at that whole list, yeah, it's like Buddhism has got a very good way of helping you to readdress balances in your practice. So I'll give you an example of this. So I suppose as I said, that this particular reading has been on my mind. It's on my mind sort of there in a certain sense. With mind distracted, never thinking, death is coming, to slave away the pointless business of mundane life and then to come out empty is a tragic error. So I feel like at the moment I've got into quite a good groove in relationship to meditation. I've been doing more meditation. I've been using my time, my free time, not all of the time, but a lot more than normal, meditating more. So in a sense I've been practicing the 5th paramita. I've also been trying to see what the Buddha saw. So I've been not just practicing samatha, which is to do with calm, tranquility, but also practicing vipassana, which is to do with trying to see what the Buddha saw, to attain transcendental wisdom. So that's the 6th paramita. But in all of this meditating that I've been doing, I also noticed that something else was happening, and that was that I was missing opportunities to give. I kind of started to notice this. So a friend had his birthday, and I had the idea, maybe I knew it was coming up, I'll need to write my friend a card. And then I put it off, maybe I probably even meditated, put it off. I'll do it later, then I'm too tired. Then the morning comes, meditated, I'll do it in the afternoon, too tired. And it went on and on and on. Like I kind of kept on putting off this writing of a friend's birthday card. It's a bit embarrassing to say that, but it's true. To the point where it was embarrassingly too late to write the card. So I missed the opportunity. And then I also started to notice, it's like, well, there are a lot of opportunities to give, aren't there, around in Berlin. There are a lot of people begging. And sometimes I just wouldn't, well, you've always got the choice, haven't you, whether you do it or not, really. But I wasn't doing it. And it's like, and I kind of started to think about that. It's like, oh, right, if I want to give, I need to be a little bit more on the front foot. I need to, in a sense, it's a bit like, I talked to a friend about it, and he was saying, oh, sometimes it's like my wallet is in my bag, and it's a bit like it's too much effort to get it out. So it's like, okay, so how can I set up the conditions where that giving is a bit more easily accessible, as in my money is more easily accessible. So I've been trying to practice with that a bit more since then. So I've been trying to act more swiftly on generous impulses. Because at times I can feel a real weight of self-clinging. I can feel a laziness in myself, not wanting to do certain things. So it means that I pass these opportunities up. So maybe as I'm sort of starting to round up, I'll just mention these 3 words again. Well, yeah, I'm going to mention 3 words. So about this particular way of practicing. So be helpful. So look for opportunities to do things for other people. benefit beings, see what needs to be done and do it, and give. So look for opportunities to loosen that sense of self by giving. And I had an image for these three kind of different phases that came to me this morning. It's not perfect, but it sort of might help, I don't know. So the image was of a rocket. So it made me think of a few of us at New Year's Eve. We went to Janowice-Brücke. It was pretty crazy. So obviously you see a lot of people shooting rockets left, right and centre kind of in Berlin on New Year's Eve. So first of all, you've got to light it, haven't you? So the lighting the rocket is the motivation. And I kind of thought it's a bit like these particular ways of motivating yourself. You might, what I said might not be your way. You've got to find your own way of motivating yourself. But it is a bit like putting a bit of fire underneath your arse. So you light the rocket, and then the rocket goes. Yeah, it just. So, going for refuge, it's a movement. It's like you have got to do something. You decide, and then you go. You move in the direction of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It's not as straightforward a journey as the rocket. Generally, sometimes the fire goes out, sometimes it goes in this direction, sometimes that, sometimes down, sometimes it gives up. But generally, that sense of going for refuge, yeah. And then benefiting beings. I actually even thought with the going for refuge is this sort of the explosion, yeah. So that sense of seeing through self, the explosion, and then the sense of explosion, like like it is with a firework, that kind of beauty of all of the light which expands in all of these directions, and falls like blessings. So this sense of all of what the Paramitas point to, this sense of giving, this sense of ethics, this sense of kindness, this sense of benefiting beings, and then it just descends. It it affects other people. So that's it.